These striking images of Chinese warships off the coast of Taiwan this month, a dire warning of a potential invasion that could disrupt the global technology supply chain, plunge the world into an economic catastrophe, and start a hot war between the U.S. and China. And according to one geopolitics expert, an actual invasion could be over before the U.S. even has a chance to respond.
So a lot of people assume that this would be sort of a Normandy type of beach landing. The reality is that terrain does not allow it.
Dmitry Alperovich predicted the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and now in a new book, he lays out how China could seize Taiwan. First, he says, the Chinese would mount a lightning-fast assault from the air and the sea.
You're still going to move amphibious assault ships across the strait. Each of them can deliver about 800 troops and, more importantly, dozens of troop transport helicopters as well as gunships to do an airborne assault. They can reach the two airports within 10 to 15 minutes.
They can do that by parking them in international waters. And Taiwan would feel constrained from firing first because that would be seen as provoking a war.
You're going to have these transport ships, mostly civilian vessels, and have been loaded with hundreds of thousands of troops, armored vehicles, tanks, logistics that you need to occupy an island of 23 million people.
To cover the attackers, Alperovich says, China would strike Taiwan's defenses from afar.
You're going to have bombers launched from the mainland. You're going to have the largest cruise missile and ballistic missile and rocket forces in the world, pummeling fixed radar installations, pummeling naval facilities, pummeling communication nodes.
Then, he predicts, Chinese Marines in huge airboats would rush up the river leading to the center of the capital city, Taipei.
All of this can happen literally within the first 30 minutes of action.
All the while, he says, the U.S. president facing an awful choice. Allow the aggression to stand or launch a war that could kill more Americans than World War II. So why is Taiwan so vital to U.S. and global interests? One reason, Taiwan manufactures almost 70% of the world's semiconductors, those tiny boards used in everything from phones and laptops to life-saving medical devices and the vast server networks that power American industry. And if China invades, experts say, the U.S. or Taiwan is likely to destroy those factories, which would spell economic disaster for much of the world. Or, if China manages to capture the factories and keep them operational, it would leap ahead in the world's most important technologies. Alperovich says that would harm American prosperity and security. But so would a war with China.
In the first year of that war, global depression right off the bat.
And that assumes it doesn't go nuclear.
That's right.
Intelligence agencies and military leaders have been warning for years that China is working on plans to seize Taiwan by force. The admiral in charge of U.S. Pacific Command told Congress in March that, quote, all indications point to the People's Liberation Army meeting Xi Jinping's alleged goal of potentially invading Taiwan by 2027.
We haven't faced a threat like this since World War II.
China has spent the last 2 decades modernizing its military to be able to destroy American ships in the Pacific.
You're going to lose ships. You're going to lose a lot of sailors. You're going to lose thousands, potentially even tens of thousands of American troops.
Alperovich says the U.S. must make containing China the focus of its foreign policy.
The United States has to make it clear to them that the cost of this conflict are going to be too huge for the Chinese economy.
He says that means ending U.S. reliance on China for things like critical minerals and solar panels. And it means arming Taiwan in a way that would make an invasion much more painful than it would be today. All to influence the calculations of the Chinese president.
We want him to wake up every single day and look at himself in the mirror as he's shaving and say, today is not the day.
There was another big headline from the White House today. President Biden endorsed a new Israeli proposal for a ceasefire in the Gaza-Hamas war. It is the first time the president has spoken about the conflict since Sunday's deadly explosion at a tent camp for refugees in Rafah, where Israel is currently expanding its offensive in spite of international pressure. We want to show you this new video of Israeli tanks and troops moving further into the city. That's a place where fleeing refugees were told to evacuate to. President Biden made clear today it is time for the conflict to end.
It's time for this war to end, for the day after to begin.
President Biden's endorsement of a new ceasefire plan came a day after a top Israeli security official said his country is preparing for at least 7 more months of war. The president said the latest proposal may be the best chance for peace.
It's a roadmap to an enduring ceasefire and the release of all hostages.
The three-phased plan, transmitted by Israeli officials to Hamas leadership by Qatar, would start with a 6-week ceasefire, new direct talks on a permanent end to the war, a withdrawal of Israeli military forces from Gaza population centers, and the release of elderly and female hostages by Hamas in exchange for hundreds of Palestinians in Israeli custody. And 600 trucks of desperately needed humanitarian aid would be allowed into Gaza each day.
Hamas says it wants a ceasefire. This deal is an opportunity to prove whether they really mean it.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his coalition government authorized the ceasefire proposal, but he said the war won't end until hostages are returned and the elimination of Hamas's military and governmental capabilities. The president suggested Netanyahu's goal isn't possible, but
at this point, Hamas no longer is capable of carrying out another October 7th, which is one of Israel's main objectives in this war, and quite frankly, a righteous one.
And he called on those who've taken to the streets around the world to protest the war to direct their pressure at Hamas.
Let the leaders know they should take this deal.
The president is heading to France next week to mark the D-Day anniversary and to meet with leaders likely to also push him to help broker peace. And congressional leaders are inviting Prime Minister Netanyahu to address a joint session of Congress before their August recess in the coming weeks.
The northeast of Ukraine is being pounded by Russian missiles and bombs. This is the smoking, wasted city of Vovchansk, sitting in the firing line of the Kremlin's new offensive.
A major turn on Ukraine, a major reversal from the White House tonight. The Biden administration giving Ukraine permission now to strike inside parts of Russia with American-made weapons for the first time.
Tonight, with the Russian assault on Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, intensifying, the Biden administration has made a major reversal, allowing U.S.-supplied weapons to be fired inside Russia. For years, the administration balked at the idea, fearing a strike on Russia itself with U.S.-made weapons could draw the U.S. into direct conflict with Russia. U.S. officials insisting tonight the U.S. weapons will be used only to strike Russian military sites that are being used to launch weapons into Kharkiv. More than a dozen other Western countries have also approved weapons being used inside Russia. But Vladimir Putin already with a threatening response, calling it an escalation, another step towards a serious conflict in Europe and around the globe.
It will be the Pentagon that will coordinate exactly where the weapons can strike inside Russia. But, David, there is no question this is a big change.
Despite the U.S. government's limited, calibrated approach, a senior Russian official responded today saying that NATO countries that supply long-range weapons to Ukraine are already participating in a war with Russia. And he reiterated Russia's threat to use tactical nuclear weapons against Ukraine.
Nearly 2,000 years ago, the Apostle John was banished to the island of Patmos as punishment for sharing his faith in Jesus Christ. The Lord gave John a series of visions which described things that would take place in the last days. The visions John saw were recorded and are now known as the book of Revelation. Throughout the scriptures, terrible times are forecast for the end of this present age. The prophet Isaiah describes the earth as empty and wasted. Isaiah 24:1. Behold, the Lord makes the earth empty and makes it waste, distorts its surface, and scatters abroad its inhabitants. In the book of Revelation, we read of an hour of trial, which shall come upon the whole world to test those who dwell on the earth. Revelation 3:10. Because you have kept my command to persevere, I also will keep you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon the whole world to test those who dwell on the earth. The Lord Jesus warns us of great tribulation, which shall threaten the survival of all life on earth. Matthew 24:21 and 22. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. The Apostle Paul speaks of sudden destruction that shall come just when men are saying peace and safety. 1 Thessalonians 5:3.